Thank you, Mr. DJ. Chairman of today's proceedings here in Barataria, Mr. Dr. Kevin Saran. Thank you very much for those words of introduction. Political leader of the National Transformational Alliance, Mr. Gary Griffith, and his wife, Mrs. Nicole Griffith Dyer Griffith, sorry. I remarried you there. The Deputy Political Leader of the NTA, Mrs. Lorraine Pouchette. Deputy Political Leader, Mr. Nikolai Edwards in absentia. He unfortunately is not able to come. And part of the reason for that I will be talking about in my little speech this afternoon. Mr. Insaf Inaitullah, our host and arranger for today, and all the other executive members of the NTA. Members of the media, I believe there are a couple of members of the media here today. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good night to one and all of you. The chairman said that I am an environmental management and sustainable development professional. I've been kind of doing that for the last 38 years. And it has allowed me to have a breadth of experience in a number of issues related to the environment and sustainable development. And before I go on, I want to just shout out Mr. Timothy Watkins Jr. You would have heard little snippets of his song, Mother Earth Crying, when I was coming onto this podium here. And some of you may remember the Sweet Soca Man singing that refrain for the March Gras 1994. Unfortunately, Brother Luther pipped him at the post and he didn't get the King of Calypso monarch at the time. But his words of that song gives us more or less a poignant reminder of how man has impacted the nature and the environment around himself, and how the way in which we structure our development in Trinidad and Tobago in particular is not in concert with the sound values of environmental preservation, conservation, and management. So you would guess by now that my little speech would be centered around how we manage our environment, how we manage the people who live in the environment. And more specifically, I'd like to share with you some of the thoughts that the NTA has in what we call an integrated approach to sustainable development. Of course, Barad was not the only Calypsonian to have sung songs related to the earth. Before him was King Austin. Everyone knows King Austin's song. It's called Progress. And King Austin was the first person to talk about the concept of sustainable development in CAISO. And if you give me a moment, I'll just quote what he said in his song, which was that, I'll have to take off my glasses, you have to forgive me. Kind of wrong-sided. I can't see to read with my glasses on, but I could see it. It's a age-related thing, right? So King Austin's opening salvo in his Calypso Progress was, as the savage hands of unscrupulous men defile, everything pass by. Time is running out as we eat and drink, species at the brink of being extinct, and I think no one can deny that the price of progress is high. And then a little later on in 2009, a gentleman that I have personal knowledge of, a fellow called the late Brother Resistance, entreated us with the words, "Let the vibes be one with you, Mother Earth. From you all material comes, and to you everything material returns. We take you for granted, Mother Earth." So this might sound like a preacher on the pulpit, but it is in fact a poignant reminder to us that we have to exist in harmony with nature and nature in harmony with us. Like many other small island development states, Trinidad and Tobago faces a number of different kinds of challenges. And the chairman indicated, I am an environmental management professional, and people like myself all over the world have been the frontline soldiers in trying to move our understanding of how we live in concert with the environment forward. And it's been a tough fight, and I would like to regrettably say that fight still has a long way to go in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, because in the main, we in Trinidad and Tobago talk the good talk, but we don't walk the good walk. And therefore, the road ahead is still paved with obstacles, and I would say a rocky course before we can get to our stage that we need to reach in 2030, which is a developed country status. One of the things that is important to understand in how we develop ourselves as a people is that we have developed over time along what is called a linear economy model. And that linear economy model talks about profit and loss, big business versus community-based businesses, and things like that. The future, as the world is heading now, is in terms of something called the green and the blue economy. And those things I would talk to you a little bit about in a short while. We at the NTA hope that as we move forward as a country and post-2025, of course that's our target, that we will be in a more positive social environment where we can move that agenda of green and blue economy development forward. So I'm sorry, I'm a scientist and a professor. If it's getting a little bit boring, tell me and I'll liven it up with the music in the background. Trinidad and Tobago has, yes sir? Oh, that's not your hand raising. Sorry boss. Trinidad and Tobago, like other small island development states, like ourselves, like in other areas of the world, have traditionally relied on oil and gas for our revenues to fund our development. And we have done well in spite of the billions of revenues siphoned off through corruption and white elephant projects. Perhaps that is why in the budget speech, the Prime Minister in his remarks said that those who keep crying for the government to stop investing in oil and gas are short-sighted, and that under a P&M government, oil and gas will continue to be the driver of our economy. But what really has been short-sighted are the P&M decisions like multipurpose ports in Guayagüari and Moruga that have not borne the promise of economic fruit, but in fact have changed our landscape and our once fertile seabed resources for the worse. And if that was not enough, the P&M government still has the Toko port squarely in their sights. And in spite of the fact that this port will have deleterious effects on the coastline, landscape, and the rich biodiversity of the marine environment, they are intent on moving forward. The question I would like to ask is, do fisher folk not also have a right to earn a livelihood from the sea? And if the P&M government continues to destroy our marine resources, can we expect our fisher folk to survive? The answer to that, obviously, is that it's going to be very difficult for them. And I'll let you know that one of my good friends is a fellow called Gary Aboud. Everybody knows Gary Aboud? Mm-hmm. Right. Good. So Gary and I always have these conversations, not that Gary, the other one, about fisheries and fish resources and things. And he'll always blame me for not taking decisive action when I was the director of the Institute of Marine Affairs. So I'll take my licks for that. However, the NTA intends to develop a policy of integrated spatial land and marine development planning, and that we are confident will ensure that all commercial interests who depend on healthy land and marine resources can indeed survive. We continue, for instance, to witness the tremendous amount of flooding in our country and the disastrous effects that this has on the population and our economy. And our goodly deputy political leader, Nikolai Edwards, is not here today because of flooding, because his car was washed away over the last week. Yeah? So that's to tell you how bad it is. The many pundits out there would say that this is due to climate change, but in reality, while our climate has been changing for the worse, our lack of a strategy to plan our development with a careful and considerate hand has led us to this point where annual flooding will be the norm. I'm sorry to say this, but this is the reality that we're going to be facing. It is interesting to note that the last physical development plan for Trinidad and Tobago was done by the Town and Country Planning Division in 1982, 40 years ago. And this is not something that we should be very proud about. The development planning issues of 1992 are certainly not those of the 21st century. And we at the NTA are extremely disappointed and distressed that proper physical planning, including the setting aside of areas of land for preservation and conservation of nature, for conservation of watersheds and aquifers, and for properly planned housing and commercial developments are not the norm. And if we don't make that change sooner rather than later, we will see more and more incidences of flooding and loss of livelihoods and loss of material wealth by many people within the population. So do you know why we have floods every year? Anybody? Any indication of why? So let me just tell you why. The watershed areas, especially those in the northern range, which are just less than a mile from here, continue to be cleared of forests to make way for housing by both the private sector and the government. And there does not seem to be any realization that if forest cover is removed to be replaced by concrete and tarmac, then rainfall will not penetrate into the ground, but run off as sheet flow. And water, ladies and gentlemen, makes no distinction as to the part it takes as it flows from the forest to the sea. It carries with it tons of debris and silt, which impacts our marine environment negatively. And I'll give an example from personal experience. In addition to being an environmental person, I also scuba dive a lot, right? I surveyed the reefs of Tobago between 1982 and 1986. And every year when I go back, I can actually see the tangible changes in both the diversity, the kind of animals that live on the reef, as well as the quality of the water around it as well. So that's an example of how that dirty water running off fast because of rain is affecting our marine resources. So why is that important? Who cares about some coral and fish and a little bit of mangroves and some seagrass? The issue is that Tobago's economy is based on tourism. That tourism product, as the Tobagoans like to tout it, is based on the clean, green, serene approach to nature and tourism. So if a diver is to spend almost 40,000 TT dollars to come and spend a week in Tobago diving in the reefs, and they're not going to see what they came to see, then they're going to go to Latin America, to Costa Rica, where they have a very strong environmental protection program. They're going to go to the Seychelles and the Maldives and islands where those things are well taken care of. They're going to go to Bonaire and Aruba, and they're going to stop to come to Tobago. And in that, away goes Tobago's tourism product. Right, Lorraine? Yeah. Yeah. So I know all of this because, as I said before, I used to scuba dive. I'm kind of old now, so I can't do it as much as before. Okay? But our watercourses, streams, and rivers, in essence, can no longer carry the volume of water during heavy rainfall and often spills over the banks, flooding large tracts of land in the process. I think you all witnessed all of that last week, right? The Caroni River burst its banks. And once that happens, the water, unfortunately, floods all of the areas that are low-lying. And again, unfortunately, for Trinidad and Tobago, and more Trinidad than Tobago, much of our commercial and housing stock are in the floodplains of Caroni, Sandy Grande, Barrackpore, and other areas like that. And the only way now to adapt to the annual flooding is going to be very expensive in that we now have to raise the levees of these main watercourses. We have to keep them clear of debris and dredge them. So that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I need to.
Okay.
It's kind of in my mind. My name is Peterson. I need to know something because of I heard you mention just about maybe a minute ago. It depends on the sea a lot because of what it gives in terms of nature.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have no doubt. I go on the sea and I know the sea. Doesn't matter what I know. What bothers me is the river is what we lack of because I think you speak about the flood and the stuff that we deal with as we speak in this Trinidad and Tobago. We have a lot of problems with water. I wonder why we don't trench or dredge rivers anymore, which is one of the most carrier for water into the sea.
But this is what I just said. I said that we have to do two things. We have to raise the levees so that the rivers don't overflow anymore. And we also have to dredge them and make sure that they're clear of all the debris and things. The major debris that clogs our rivers, interestingly enough, is appliances, mattresses, plastics, and styrofoam. Things that we ourselves throw out and put into the water courses. Because we think that that's where, if you put it out of sight, it becomes out of mind, right? Correct. That's how we deal with garbage in general. Put it out of sight and then it doesn't matter. Just disappears. The important thing to recognize in Trinidad and Tobago is that in order to manage our environment, we have to manage how we plan and develop our country. And it is also interesting to note that after much hiatus and agitation by the citizenry in the late 1990s over the need to enact the Development of Land Bill, a new act called the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act 10 of 2014 was finally developed and assented to by Parliament. And that was meant to repeal the existing Town and Country Planning Act. It is obvious, it's kind of curious to people like me that although it was assented to, it is still to be proclaimed. And 8 years on, we're still waiting on the president to proclaim this act. Maybe it's because it's not important enough.
So we don't have the equipment.
No, we have the equipment, we have the technical resources. Our technocrats are very well trained. What we need is the political will to make things happen. Perhaps one day in the future, Minister Beckles can enlighten the population on the steps necessary to bring this legislation, which calls for the creation of a national planning authority, into full force. Interestingly enough, in June of this year, the National Planning Authority was appointed and its directors took office. The chairman of that National Planning Authority is a Dr. James Armstrong. Anyway, so the other thing about the environment that's important for us is, of course, climate change. And as we move into the realm of how climate is changing, we also see the effects of climate on many of the resources that we have. And that need to incorporate adaptation through building for climate change is also important for us. Again, I'd point back to the fact that the NTA's plan is an integrated approach to spatial, marine, and land planning, and that is one of the things that we hope would move us into a new future along the lines of the green and blue economy. Okay, so everyone knows what the blue and the green economy is all about? No? Okay, so a green economy means that, I'll give you it in the form of an example. If I have plastic bottles, because I like to drink water from a bottle produced by a fellow up in the east, I'm not calling names because I don't want to advertise, then, and then I throw it away in the garbage, right? So that's a linear economy. It goes as waste. But the green economy would require me to take that bottle, put it into the IKEA bin, and have IKEA recycle it. The problem we have in Trinidad is the IKEA bin only holds, they don't recycle. And there's still an opportunity for us to move forward to recycle from what we collect through the IKEA system. And that needs to be developed a little further. Okay? Another example it would be the used oil that comes from your vehicles. Right now it goes where? Down the drain. Right. So what we want to do, and which is now going to be happening very soon, is that we want to collect that. We want to refine it, produce the base oil that you make the oil from in the first place, and put it back on the market. So that is what is called a green economy. It is a circular economy from the life cycle of the material that you're producing. Everybody with me?
How long would it take to make that kind of science book?
Well, it won't take very long.
I know. I mean, in the past, that is true. Because we always throw it in the water, right?
Right. I don't think it'll take very long. But anyway, let me move on because I have other speakers coming. So the other aspect of that kind of circular economy for small island developing states is something called the blue economy. And the blue economy focuses on our marine resources on the coastline. The blue economy is the real thing that we have to develop now because it integrates what we want to do in terms of building stock on the coastline. It integrates what we want to do in terms of our industrialization in Point Lisas and other industrial areas with the need to protect fish, need to protect our wetlands, and the need to protect other marine resources. So we want to move towards that scenario where things work better for the country, where the environment supports people and people support the environment, where we have public, private, civil society partnerships moving that agenda forward and making life a lot more integrated for all of us. Okay? So the chairman is about to tap me on the head because I'm taking too long. And it's partly your fault, Mr. Gentleman, because I had to answer your question. I'm just pulling your legs. I'm just pulling your leg. So Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to close as I started with a quote from Byron's composition. It goes like this: "In the beginning, by the sixth day morning, the whole of creation was given birth. And then God made man and gave him dominion over every living creature on earth." Tragedy in the garden. We all know what happened. Shamefully banished from Eden, we witnessed the first paradise lost. And since then, it is Mother Earth who ended up paying the costs. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 21st century, environmental justice is linked to inextricably with human justice, and the right to clean air, clean water, productive land, and rich diversity of flora and fauna on this earth are not just nice-sounding buzzwords, but an integral part of the inalienable right of all human beings. We in the NTA recognize the value of integrated sustainable development of our country and will commit to ensuring a greener future for all of our citizens by embracing renewable energy generation while weaning us off our heavy dependence on fossil fuels for economic development. We, the NTA, are an alliance of like-minded people who have strong patriotic values and common commitment to a future for all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are a movement that values inclusivity of people in the governance process, and we believe that this participatory approach to governance will take Trinidad and Tobago into the next decade as a prosperous, developed country. Partner with us, become part of the alliance and the movement, and let us build this nation together. Thank you very much.